Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I think some of you are already waiting for this video, as I obviously released a couple of videos about kitchen installations, and I promised that I will show you how to install the worktops. I told you that we are normally installing about 6 different types of worktops. This is the first type and the most common worktop that we come across, and is laminate worktop, and I will show you now how to install a laminate worktop, obviously in a professional way. I choose this particular installation because these walls are not straight, so basically this L shape here is not on a 90-degree, so I don't want people to say, well, but this is in a perfect situation, what about this, what about that? So let's get on with. We just have to measure the first length of worktop that we're gonna cut. So first of all, obviously we have to decide which side we are going to join the worktop, which one will be first one to be cut and which one will be the second one. In our case, we'll cut this worktop that sits on the window side, so this will have to be cut in full. When you're jointing two worktops together, you have two cuts. So basically one is a female cut and the other one is a male cut. You always start with a female, so you do the female first and then the male will actually join into the female. So you see us now cutting the worktop for the female cut. This goes fully, so from that edge of the unit to the edge of the wall. You notice that this is slightly bigger. We'll have to cut it slightly bigger, do the cut, and then we'll need to trim it down because the other worktop that will join into it will have to be 5.5 centimeters shallower, because the unit's been cut down, otherwise they will be in the doorway. It might seem like a lot of information, it might make you feel confused, but trust me, we have a 30 minutes video and I'm pretty sure I can make you understand what is what. So like I said, the first worktop is in the position. This will be our female cut and the other one on the right will be the male cut. You just place the worktop in the position, make sure that it fits, make sure you are okay in terms of gaps around the wall and so on, so on. And then we're just going to use this jig for the router, and we're going to make that cut that is called a female cut. Two things that I want to mention now is when you're jointing two worktops, you should be careful that joint to be as far as possible from the sink, so basically as far as possible from water. And the other thing is you should make sure that that is not exactly where the sink needs to go or where the hob needs to go. Let me show you now how we do the settings for the first cut. So like I said, you need a jig that is special made for worktops, and then every single jig that is on the market will have an instruction book. There's the jig, is from Unica, is a decent good jig. You need a decent quality one, obviously, if you do this as a professional. Now in here, instruction, you have a left hand joint and a right hand joint. As you're looking now, ours is a right hand joint, you see. So that is a right hand female, is exactly what we have to cut on this side of the worktop, is a right hand female. That's the one. So you go back and you look, I said, right hand female, and there's this, right? So that the instruction will show you how to set the jig and where to place the pegs. It does show you that the worktop should be face up, and that should be the good edge of the worktop. And then it shows you the jig. So you can see Unica, and then it shows you where to place the pins. 3 pins in this case. Sorry, I meant to say 4 pins in this case. So when you're doing the female cut, you always need 4 pins, and when you do the male cut, you only use 2 of the pins or pegs. Right, so let me show you now how they do. They have pre-drilled holes. You see right R off, LF, that's right female and left female. So basically, even if you do a right female or a left female, the jig is in the same position. You're just changing the worktop. And then in here you have the width of the worktop. In our case, this is 616. You can see here 616. This is very important, so you have to measure the worktop and place the peg in the right location. So 616, yeah, and then right hand female, and then you have another two. They say right hand female, right hand female. We tap this in. They quite tight. This is they quite tight when they new. The jig is not new, but the pegs are quite new, and they quite obviously quite stiff. So you put this in place, and then you put the jig on the actual worktop, and you want to make sure that all the pegs are touching the worktop. All three pegs are touching the worktop. It's very important. This cut needs to be on a 90-degree. There is no adjustment in this cut. So after you set up the jig, obviously you'll need to clamp this down with a pair of clamps. Jig clamps, or these quick clamps that we have, you just want to make sure that it's nice and secure in place and it hasn't been moved, and all four pegs are in contact with the worktop. I recommend that you put a new cutter onto your router, so I always put a new cutter when I'm doing a new worktop installation. They don't seem to last very long, and if they are chipped, if they have any chips inside, you might see that in your worktop. So I always put a new cutter when I'm doing a new worktop installation. Always make sure your router is unplugged. Never do any work or anything on the router if it's plugged in. Working with a router is quite messy. It does create a lot of dust. So basically, if you can do this outside, then do it outside. If you can't do it outside, then you have to do it inside. If you have anyone with you, then he can hold the hoover and you can collect some of this dust. But like I said, there's a lot of dust produced from these routers. Also, it's a very good idea to wear PPE when you actually handling a power tool. I use safety glasses all the time, and if I do something very noisy for a longer period of time, I will use some ear defenders. When we come to do the actual cut, I like to do 5 passes, so I will take 7-8 millimeters at a time. I don't like to do it too quickly, so basically if you do just 1 or 2 passes, you will find out that your router bit does wear very quick. Another important advice is when you do kitchen worktops, your router should always cut from left to right, like you see me in this video, yeah? Always from left to right and never from the right to left, because if you're gonna cut from right to left, the actually router will damage your surface, will damage the worktop. So like we're doing now, we're cutting from the left, and when the router finish his last centimeter, sometime like in here, he like to actually tear the work surface, but that's the back, so that's fine. If he was going to do it the other way around, that will be the front. So like I said, keep in mind always from left to right, and always the last pass. You saw me doing the last pass a bit slower and more precise, like holding the router very well. Make sure that it doesn't move in any other direction, because as soon as you take the last bit, your other side of the jig won't be supported. So make sure you have a steady hand and you will be fine. After that, just use a bit of sandpaper and make sure that everything is nice and clean. Let me show you now how the cut looks like. So basically this is the female cut. You see, it's very nice and very sharp cut. There's no chips, and as long as your router bit it's good, you will never have chips. If you see any chips, then it does mean it's time to change your router bit. Now we're just gonna turn the worktop the other way around with the back up, and we'll do the slots for the bolts or for the clamps that actually clamping the worktops together. I said that before, it's very easy. You have all the instructions in the actually worktop jig instructions. The only thing that you have to be careful is when you're turning things around and worktops around, to make sure that you do the correct side. Now I will show you how we position the jig for the actually bolts. So you see female bolts right hand side, yeah. So right female bolt slot. This is a right hand female, and this is the position of the slots. So you have B and B and B. So they all are for bolts. So these three are the pegs that we are going to use. Yeah, so it's very simple. Like I said, it's in the instructions. Just read the instruction. Um, and if you are a beginner, I will suggest not to memorize these instructions, and I will suggest that you should look over them all the time, because sometimes when you are on the rush, it's very easy to miss things and do things the other way around, and you're just gonna find out that you damaged the worktop. It never happened to me, so like I said, I did literally hundreds of worktops. I never did one mistake, not even one mistake. It's like I said, it's not easy to do mistakes as long as you read the instruction and you look and you think, and like we like to say, measure 3 times and cut once. Now I just show you the clamp, the bolt, because we have to mark the deepness of that, so we have to go as deep as that clamp. We don't want to go too shallow or too deep. We just want to make sure that that clamp fits in and it's flush with the actual worktop. I just show you a clamp, a bolt for the worktop installation. Is the new model, the one that you just use an Allen key onto your drill driver, and it will take literally seconds to obviously secure that in place. Older models is the one with that you have to use a spanner and you just have to tighten it, and it's an awkward position and stuff like that. So I always keep some of this in the van, and if I get any of the old type delivered with the kitchen, I'm just chucking them away and using this ones, because you are a lot more faster. And there's one thing that obviously you have to know: when you tighten worktop together, depending of what kind of cylinder are you using in between the worktops, you might have to move quite fast. So I recommend to use these bolts. I will take the camera now and I will show you how these slots are finished. We're just using some sandpaper and sand down all the edges, and make sure you also clean this, because when you're gonna turn this the other way around and you're gonna be in the cupboard trying to tie them together, all that sawdust will come down into your eyes. So always clean them before the installations. Okay, let me show you now how they look. So there's three for a 600 or roughly 600 millimeter worktop. You have to use three clamps, and this is how the bolts are sliding in, and you see they just a mil under the worktop surface. Looking at that cupboard where the actually worktops will have to be connected together, you can see that the unit has a full top. They normally have two stretchers, one at the front, one at the back. So in this case, we'll have to drill a couple of holes to actually access these bolts and tie them together. Now we also have to cut those 5.5 centimeters that I was telling you in the beginning of the video. We're just marking that now, and we're just gonna cut them. The reason that we did this now and we haven't done it in the beginning is because if we was going to cut these 5.5 centimeters, then when we was placing the jig, we have to obviously somehow keep the jig away from the actually worktop with 5.5 centimeters. So this is easier to be done. You just do it, you have all the reference points, and then you cut it after. Now we are going to place the worktop in the position, see if it's good, see if it's like we want it. We're also going to mark for the clamps and drill 3 holes into the actually kitchen unit. You only have to drill one side, so the side where you're gonna choose to put the Allen keys head, where you have to tighten the worktops. The other one can stay as it is. You can see we flush there, and we're quite good at the wall on the other side. So this is what we wanted, and now it's time to do the other length. Unfortunately, the other cut of the worktop will have to be done next day. We have 2 lengths of worktop, and both are damaged. You can see one is there, one is there. We don't have enough worktop to do that side, so we'll have to make these worktops for the other side. They will just make the other side of the kitchen, and we'll get we already spoke with the shop. We'll get a new worktop in for tomorrow, and we'll show you that tomorrow. Right, so back the next morning, let me show you how we actually mark in order to get the perfect angle. So like I said before, this is not a 90-degree wall. So basically you putting the other worktop on top of that and on top of one scrap of worktop, so you kind of like have it higher, and then you take your pencil and you mark underneath the worktop, you mark a line in between those two. So in there you can, I will show you now with the pencil what I mean. So you take your pencil and you mark underneath the worktop, you mark there a line where they are actually intersected, and one line there. So you just mark. By marking these two lines, you get the perfect angle in between these worktops, and this is what we are going to cut here. Yeah, so at the moment we are about 5 mm differences in these two lines. Now, very important here, this is the part of the actual installation that you can adjust, so it doesn't have to be 90-degree. Like I said before, this is a right hand joint and this will be a right hand nail. Again, you look in the book, it shows you how to keep the jig, it shows you where to put the pins, it shows you how the worktop should be. In this case, worktop is face down and the good edge is on the left. Yeah, it does show you that. It does show you to use 2 pegs. Right, these pegs, they should be tight against the worktop just if you have a 90-degree cut. In our case, this is not a 90-degree cut, so basically we have to follow the marks that we actually did with the pencil when we obviously check the angle. So by doing that, we have to kind of like move the jig a little bit, but you have to move it so way that your first pin is always in contact with the actual worktop, and the second one is the one that actually goes away from your worktop. Depending of how the wall goes, sometimes you have to remove the second pin and just leave the first one. But the first one, like I said, it has to be always in contact, and this one you can see is not touching the worktop. So this is the way to do it. If you're gonna put the first pin away from the worktop, you'll find out that your cut won't be very good at the beginning where they're actually joining, because you are changing the angle of that curve a little bit. Also bear in mind, you can't use this technique if your walls are too much away from 90 degrees. I will not move this jig more than 8 millimeters, maximum 10 millimeters, because if you move them more, you will see that this is not a perfect cut. I mean, the more you move the jig from the 90 degree, the more obvious your joint will be at the intersection just by the corner post where you have that round bit. So you can move it a bit like I said, but don't go too crazy on this, because you will notice that is not a perfect joint. You just saw me there routering the edge of the worktop. Always try to take off as less as possible. Like I said, the more you take with the router, the quicker you will damage your router bit. When you are using this technique and you're moving your jig from the actually 90 degree, you have to use color match silicone for the joint. This is not a joint where you can use just wood glue or just clear silicone. In this case, you have to use a color match silicone in between, because your joint will never be as perfect as one that is on the 90 degree. Don't get me wrong, this joint, it won't look bad, it will look as good as the other one as long as you use color match silicone. If you try to use just clear silicone, you might see a difference between this one and the 90 degree one. Now we are going to do the slots for the clamps. The same scenario, 3 pegs all on B from bolts. One will rest on the back of the worktop and two will rest on the side of the worktop. Everything in the instructions I showed you before, you just have to look. So this is the right hand male, and you just have to look for right hand male bolt slots. Yeah, so there you have it. Bolt slots, right hand male. It shows you how to keep the jig. This is the way that you should keep it. Place it on. It does says worktop back and good edge on the left. So now we're just going to start routering. We mark the height of the bolts, and we'll start doing the slots like you saw us earlier. So now we have the worktop cut, we have the slots done, we have the angle correct. Now we're just gonna measure up and cut the final length of the worktop. I always like to leave these worktops long, and I recommend you leave these worktops longer so you can mark, so you can do the cut and then cut it to the right to the final measurements after. It's also good because just in case something happen and the cut gets damaged or the worktop gets damaged because various reasons, you still can do another cut. Always try to leave it a bit longer, do the cut, and then you just cut the other side to the final position. We're just cutting here and we're marking. We're probably gonna leave about 3-4 millimeters gap, so we can kind of like be able to place them down and have the silicone, have the filler in, and all this stuff. It's a bit difficult because they actually have to go a bit inside the wall, but yeah, we manage it. They are in, they cut, and you can see, I think they're looking pretty good. In this case, we just have to check and see if we're happy with the joint, and if we're happy with the joint and we have a nice and consistent gap all around, we can proceed the actually installation. You can see we have a good joint there. There's a bit of gap obviously, but that will be, once that we clamp it with the bolts from underneath, they will come together, they will come closer, and that gap will close. Now we'll have to do a curve in the worktop. So this side here, even if the door opens on the other side, we still have to make that edge of the worktop a bit more pleasant, a bit more friendly. So we will curve the worktop from there. Yeah, so we'll curve the worktop from about there till about where the panel is, or just before this panel. It will be just a small curve, but something to make it a bit more friendly. If you want to skip this side and go forward to the actually worktop connections, you can do that, but I wanted to show you this, show you how this has been done. For this application, I will use a different jig. This is a universal jig that has all the radiuses, all the curves. I have a straight line. This is a very good jig for a kitchen installer. I checked, so when I was happy with the curve, you can see the jig, you can see the curve. I checked with the router, and then I'm happy with that, and I'm just going to proceed cutting that. This will get done in the same manner. Will be 5 passes, and try to keep your router as steady as possible. Right, so now we're just going to put the bolts in. You can see me putting the side of the Allen key inside where I drilled the holes. The other side, like I said, it doesn't have to be drilled because it doesn't have anywhere to move. So as long as you know your worktop will fit and you test it, then you're fine. You can just put it in the position. So sorry, my camera was off. I thought it's filming, but it's not. Basically what we did that you haven't saw is we run a bit of clear silicone from the middle of the worktops going down, and on the actually top of the worktop we run this color match silicone, and we put some more on the top. We kind of like moving the worktops together, and then we put some more as we need it. And now we're just going to proceed to start tightening the clamps. So you will see now how quick these clamps are. Like I said, you just use a bit for your drill driver and you just tie them. You see, just like that, and it's done. It's not fully. I like to do them a bit and then go up and see how the worktops looks like, and when I'm happy with the levels, then I tie them to the full capacity. So this is how the worktop looks like clamped together. You can see how much squeeze out we have. That's good. We know that that joint is full of silicone. I just like to go around and touch it and see if I have no differences in the actually levels, and then I take a packer or a piece of plastic and scrape this excess with this packer. Yeah, and then test again. Make sure that your surface is flat, is very flat, and you don't have any differences. If you have any differences, just take a piece of timber and a hammer and just tap it down till it gets to the same level. Then I'll take the silicone and put some more silicone over this joint and let it set. When this will get dry, we're just gonna get a scraper and clean this very carefully. The silicone is dry now, so we'll take this window scraper and we're just gonna lightly scrape the surface. It's basically just to remove the excess. This is an operation that you have to be very careful not to scratch the worktop, but if you hold this scraper firm down and don't move it left to right, you will be fine. All we have left now is to use this cleaner and a piece of towel paper and clean all the silicone that is been left on the worktop. So very simple. Put some of this cleaner on the surface and wipe with the paper, and you will see this will clean everything. And to be fair, this is all that you should know about the worktop installation, about the laminate worktop installation. You saw me, it wasn't that complicated. If you have this jig, you will have the instructions, so there shouldn't be anything that you should not be able to do. All you have to do is to be careful and to pay attention and measure 3 times and cut once. So this will be everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this will answer a lot of questions. Please like and subscribe if you like the video, and I will see you next time with my next video. Goodbye.